Tonight, have you ever wondered whether the way banks and other financial institutions carry out their business is lawful? Do they actually have legitimate contracts with you that can hold water? A website called Get Out of Debt Free thinks they've got a lot of serious questions to answer, which the bankers seem reluctant to address. Are the types of people who have benefited from the bankers' bailout now on the back foot, trying to save their system from total collapse? Indeed, are they now so desperate to defend the indefensible, they'll try anything? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, this really is On the Edge, the programme you cannot afford to miss. Good evening, welcome to On the Edge. My name is Alex G and I'm here with two gentlemen from a website called Get Out of Debt Free. Can I introduce to you Jon and Ceylon. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Edge.
Good evening.
Now, this is going to be a little bit of a guide to people who have never heard the concept that what the bankers are doing in terms of calling in debt has a lot of holes in it. Now, can you actually describe to us what these Achilles heels are? How did you actually become aware of them?
Well, I first came aware of it when I did a business transaction which went very wrong, and I ended up in debt, and I felt really, really intimidated. I had all these people phoning up the whole time, and it wasn't the bank. The bank forgot about it really quickly. And then I suddenly got all these companies like Moorcroft and phoning up, and I thought it was really strange because one minute they'd be chasing me for one amount, and then the next moment they'd be chasing me for another amount, and then they'd forget about it and another company. And I started sort of thinking, hey, it's sort of like something fishy here. And so then I started sort of getting on the internet and actually trying to work out what was going on. And I came across a lady by the name of Mary Elizabeth Croft, and I read her book, and it sort of all started becoming clear. But that didn't solve my problem, because what I had to do is actually write letters back to those debt collectors. Now, Mary actually gave us some hints on her website and in her ebook. So what I did, I actually pulled together some template letters, stuck them on a really basic website. That was about 3.5 years ago. Okay. And from then, it's just built up and started talking about it.
So, Ceylon, how did you get involved in debt busting, as it were?
I was running my own company, and then the government made a change in the legislation in 2006, which came into effect in 2008, which basically killed my company. By 2008, the company had gone, about to lose the house, managed to sell it just before I lost it, but still owed loads, allegedly, of debt. So I started looking around, realising, well, at first it was anger, and I decided I wasn't going to pay them anyway, but then I started looking around, and the more I looked into it and coming across Jon's site, realised that what they were actually doing was totally unlawful anyway. Now,
that's an incredible statement. Now, when you say unlawful, what are we talking about here? What is it that they are doing which is not legitimate, if you like?
Well, what I say goes to the heart of the banking system. To start off with, fractional reserve banking, which is the only way we do banks, means that the central banks create a bond, and they then lend the high street banks something like 7 or 8 times that amount, okay? And then those high street banks, when we come along to get a credit card, they actually create something like 7 or 8 times more money and give to us. Now, they create that money effectively with our signature. If they don't have our signature, they can't create that money.
So what you're saying is you deposit £1 and then they can lend, what, 7, 8, 9, 10?
A high street bank will be, I think, 7 to 8.
Right.
That's my understanding. As I don't take anything I take for granted. Check it out. Do check it out, yeah.
I mean, that's certainly something that is obvious on your website. It's very much the case that you don't suggest people just follow you willy-nilly.
Totally.
It's all about them getting the complete and utter understanding of how the system works.
Yeah. We offer lots of information, lots of advice. There's a forum, which Ceylon is actually brilliant because he's very good at sitting up until all hours in the morning, answering lots and lots of people's questions. And I get out doing lots of talks. But don't believe anything we say. If there's anything that you're not sure about, you know, don't take us. People are very used to sort of, you know, taking the news or looking to teachers or whoever. There's always a professor or somebody that says, I know all the answers. We're not saying we all, you know, we know the answers. What we're saying is, look, this is what the conclusions we've come to. But if you don't believe us, go and check it out yourself. And in fact, it helps if people do a little bit background research themselves. But what we're doing, it seems to make an awful lot of sense.
So, in effect, people should follow their own path on this.
Most definitely.
Don't take anything for granted. It's much like anything that you actually hear on the Edge. If you're not sure about it, we insist you go and check it out and see what is going on. So, Ceylon, we heard mention of your forums there.
Yeah.
Now, what sort of information, what sort of exchanges happen on there? I mean, it's from what I've seen of it, it seems a fairly lively affair.
Yes, we do our best to try and answer anyone's queries or questions they come up with. And I always try and help them to the best of my ability, simply because I was there. I've been down the scared, fear route where, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay this? However, it's if everybody actually just read through the forum themselves, they would find that all the questions they can even think of have already been answered by me or others. When I first started answering questions, there was only me answering questions. As time went by, I became more and more capable of dealing with them. And now it's at the point where there's half a dozen or so other guys that are actually on there now and pretty much give the answer that I would have given anyway. So it's actually given me time to get on with other sides of the forum. Now, on a past episode, we've had Roger Hayes of the British Constitution Group on, who has been talking about the legitimacy of council tax. Are there comparisons here in terms of what we're actually talking about in terms of the law that you've discovered?
Yeah, I think there are definitely. It's not an area that I've actually got involved with, but there are definitely parallels, because what they're saying is this is the law and this is how it is. And when you actually start researching it, you come up with very, very different conclusions. And so council tax isn't an area that I can start talking about with any confidence, because I haven't actually had to deal with any council tax. But with the banks, we're fairly confident. We're now getting debt collectors actually writing to a lot of people, and they're actually showing the letters on the website saying, and the debt collectors now saying, we will no longer pursue this matter any further. At one time they'd have just said no. You know, they wouldn't have actually written back, they'd just have put it back in the bin and somebody else would have taken it on. But they're actually getting scared now.
And we're actually talking about not the banks, but these particular debt collection companies that they've passed it on to them.
Well, that's right. Well, the banks rarely actually, there's only one or two banks that actually pursue any sort of so-called debts. And that's normally because they've actually got I think MBNA actually have their debt collection side within the company. But most debts, they create the money out of nothing. Right. They then write it off. So they've written it off against tax. They then sell the debt. Now, this is the thing, they sell the debt to the debt collector. So under the Bills of Exchange Act, if somebody actually, if you pass the debt to somebody else, or somebody pays your debt off for you, you're not in debt. So
now
that's just one.
This is the Bills of Exchange Act
1882.
1882,
I think it is in this country, yes.
And I would imagine most people haven't heard of this. So how did you come across it?
I just looked it up. You know, I just started getting deeper and deeper. I looked at Robert Menard's videos. I looked at the time, you know, there wasn't a lot of information. Even just 3.5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information. Now there's loads of websites.
Now you say Robert Menard, that's M-E-N-A-R-D?
That's correct.
So if you put that name into YouTube,
yes,
you'll see things actually come up.
And funny enough, he's Canadian, as is Mary Elizabeth Croft. A lot of Canadians waking up.
And Is their law and their situation the same as us? Because no doubt they would say, well, if it's USA, if it's Canada, they've got different legal systems and it doesn't apply.
Well, we cover UK, we cover Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Australia and South Africa, because they've all got very similar laws. I don't know about other countries, but those countries either have the Bills of Exchange Act, or in America you have the Uniform Commercial Code.
So we are talking about legitimate acts that have been in force for ages. They've not been repealed. There's nothing that's replaced them. This is actual constitutional stuff that people can grab into.
Correct.
Right, in which case, it's time for a break now. So tune in after the break to On the Edge and find out where we take this next. Back to On the Edge. I'm Alex G, and we're talking with the website Get Out of Debt Free, and in particular representatives from that particular website, Jon and Ceylon. Now, we are live, which means you can take part in the programme. If something sounds a little bit awry to you and you're not sure what you've just heard, you can text us in. The text number is 86686. That's 86686. And you need to put the word EDGE right at the beginning of that, followed by your message, and of course standard network charges apply. Now we have our TJ ready to fill us in on what you've been saying so far on the text messages, TJ being a text jockey. So Glenda, welcome Glenda. Tell us more about what's been coming in on the texts.
Hello Alex. We've had a very interesting evening. Mark from Cwmbran is asking Edge, how do you deal with the bailiffs on the doorstep when they turn up to enforce illegal debts, as most don't understand lawful statute law?
Okay, so gentlemen, there's bailiffs on the doorstep, the concept of illegal debts, and how you actually deal with them when they're on your doorstep. So who'd like to take that?
I'll take that. Well, first thing you've got to understand is that the standard bailiffs have no power whatsoever. They will tell you they can come in your property whenever they want and remove property. They cannot. They're like vampires. You have to allow them in once. If you've allowed them in, they can come back and possibly break into your property and remove it. If you don't let them in the first place, there's nothing they can do. My son was dealing with a particular bailiff called Equita, who were threatening to come around and remove his property. And he showed me the letter and he got a little worried because it says, we would prefer you to be there, but if you're not, we will remove property anyway. And just to put his mind at rest, I actually phoned up the bailiff and stated that they'd said they were going to come and remove property, to which they replied, yes, we can legally come and remove property because once we've had a walk-in possession order. Now, a walk-in possession order is when they've actually walked into your property and started jotting down what you've got. If you never let them in the first place, they can't get in. And the bailiff admitted that if we've not entered your property, we cannot get in. One of the tricks they will do is try pushing past you.
Right.
If they touch you, that's assault. Call the police.
What, just touching you?
Touching you is assault.
Okay.
So they can't push their way in, force past you, that's assault. If they do that, call the police there and then. And they will back off, and also threaten them with a Form 4 warning, which you can send off to their certificating court, and they basically could lose a job for that. Okay,
okay. Now, when we say illegal debt, where are they going with that? What do they actually mean?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they're coming from on that. But I would say that it really goes to the whole concept of how the money is created. And when you realise the system is totally fraudulent, it gets a little bit complicated, and we don't want to start getting into sort of too deep here. But when you realise that they're creating money out of thin air, then it is unlawful. Now, it's not. The difficulty is you've got illegal and unlawful. Now, what we work with, we do quote statutes, but only to them, because the statute law, and I think if I can quote Black's Law Dictionary, a statute law is a legislative rule of a society given the force of law by those who consent to it. So if we don't consent, the whole house of cards come tumbling down. Now, normally when anything, you know, if you see a policeman or if you have to go to court, they ask you your name. And giving your name, especially in a courtroom, when they say, are you so-and-so and so, and you say yes, then what you're doing is consenting to your name. Now, it's a little bit like Monopoly here, because we've got, what we don't realise is we've got a token. And our token is our name, mostly in uppercase, or it's your name with Mr. in front of it. It's not your common law name. And that's, common law is the law of the land, and statute law is effectively the law of the sea. So we don't want to get too complicated here, but the reason why you have to go into a dock in a courtroom is because you have to be on dry land.
Right.
Because it's an admiralty court, but you have to stand on the dock or in the dock. But that's something that people, something for people to Google.
To actually look into the difference between your common law name and your statute law name, and there's something about birth certificates as well.
Well, that's how I understand it, because it's the reason it's called birth certificates. You know, what a ship does when it goes into harbour, it births.
Right.
And so it's all it's tied up in our language. This goes back an awful long way. It certainly goes back to the Romans, probably the Phoenicians, Babylonians. So it's come through our language effectively. So it's quite it's a bit of an eye opener when you first stumble across it.
So literally, there is you, the common law.
There is me,
being.
the living, breathing soul.
Yeah.
It's interesting. If you're going to go into business, you can be a sole trader, a living, breathing soul, or you can be a partnership. That's lots of souls coming together on a ship. Or you can be a company. But if you think, where else do you get companies? Oh yes, you get ships companies, don't you? It all goes back to admiralty law, and you know, statute law is all the rule of the sea. Now it gets a bit complicated, but as I say, they create, when you're born, you are delivered, just like UPS deliver, just like ships deliver goods. And from the paperwork that the doctor signs, they create a certificate. And from that, a fictitious entity is created. And that's what we sign for. And so every credit card is always in uppercase. And on the back it says authorised signature. And you have to think, who are you authorising? Now, I believe, and I'm sure Ceylon does as well, that you are authorising your fictitious entity. This straw man, if you like, it's also known as. So it's not you. And the way I see it and the way I explain it in my talks is when you're playing Monopoly, I mean, the great thing about Monopoly and the global financial system is there's so many parallels. You know, you've just got this fake money that's just printed and is absolutely worthless, but you also have a token. And I believe that this straw man, this fictitious entity, what's also known as the person, that's like your racing car or your dog. And now, if once you realise you've got a token to play the game, you can then decide whether you want to move 3 places and end up in prison, or go, no, I'm not going to touch it because I know what's going to happen here. And so it's a matter of stepping away and understanding how they're creating this system.
So it's on that basis of looking at the difference between the common law and the statute law that we move on to writing letters to the banks when they say that you owe this money. And so what do there are various letter templates on your website. Now, what do these ask the banks to address?
Right, I've got one in front of me here. We ask for, what we say, look, we're really happy to settle any financial obligation that we've got. Because we're not saying we're not going to pay you back, but so we're more than happy to pay you back. However, we would like, there's a few things that we would like. We would like validation of the debt. So show us the accounting, show us how you created the money, which they should be able to do.
And they'll probably send you statements when you.
They do. They do send us statements.
And but you wouldn't allow those.
No, that's not valid. They're not actually showing us any validation of the debt. And we're also saying verification of your claim under the Bills of Exchange Act. And so we're saying, or even give us a sworn affidavit or a hand-signed invoice. And you know, we've both been in business, and we know that you don't normally pay anything unless you actually get an invoice. Now, why don't they invoice us?
Well, that's great. So all you're asking from them is an invoice for the amount they say you owe. And nothing comes back?
Well, they can't supply what we're asking for. They can't supply, and we know they can't supply that. But we ask for a contract. I mean, we also use contract law because that goes back years, and it's how we would deal with each other. But we say, you know, can you give us a copy of the contract signed by both parties? And sometimes on loans you'll get a little squiggle, but no name against it. But the thing is, because they are a fictitious entity and we are a living, breathing soul, we cannot contract under contract law with a fictitious entity.
So it's got to be equal to equal, really.
It has.
Yeah.
That's what the contract. That's what contract law says. Yeah.
So under contract law, you have to deal with an entity on the same level. You can't actually have one under the statute law and one under the common law. Is that?
Yeah. Which is why they get us under the statute law with our fictitious. It's like having a company created in your name. But it's been going on for so long, people don't realise the difference between the straw. There's a lovely video. It's a nice little animation called Meet Your Straw Man. Right. And I'd suggest you get onto YouTube and anyone sort of look it up because it explains it really simply.
That's terrific. So in terms of when people get into debt, the letters route is one route from what you're saying. And what's involved in that?
Well, there's two routes. The letters, if you're dealing with debt collectors, what we've got here is a lovely little stickers that we do, and you can download these off the website. Right. And everything on the website is free of charge. So we take donations, and but everything, you know, we're not making loads of money out of this at all. And what it says is basically no contract returned to sender. So you can open up your letter from the debt collector. You think, well, hang on, I haven't got a contract with you. Even the banks, you haven't got a contract with them unless they can prove it. Right. So you can send these to the banks as well if they can't supply a valid contract. But it says, I do not recognise you. I do not understand your intent. It's not my will nor wish to contract with you, and a few other sort of things. So. That's an easy way. This is a really simple way.
Does that work?
It does work.
And you've got people who've used it and.
Yeah, I mean that's a very simple one. We suggest if you've got a debt under £5,000, use that. Anything more, we suggest that you use something a little bit with a few more teeth in it.
So we fly the bombers. We fly the bombers into this.
That's right.
Ceylon is piloting the bomber. What do we have as the payload then?
Well, pretty much we ask the same questions, and stating we'll happily pay if you can actually prove that we owe anything. But the debt collectors tended to pretty much ignore them letters until I started to add fee schedules to it.
Fee schedules?
Well, if you think about it, if you go a penny overdrawn, 10 pence overdrawn at your bank account, you get a £35 fine. Or they'll call it a charge.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, £35 for 10 pence seems a bit steep. Well, I'm doing a lot of research.
I think a lot of people will be aware of that sort of scenario where the banks are just so unreasonable on an overdraft.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I've done more research you can imagine, and my time's very valuable. So for a start, I charge them £1,000 an hour for dealing with their paperwork that they send to me. I've also trademarked and copyrighted my name,
right,
which is a common law copyright of your actual name.
Yep.
And that is a very valuable thing because I can charge a lot, but I only charge £1 million a time for any trademark infringement.
Right, okay.
It sounds like a lot.
Well, it's mounting up as you go, yes, definitely.
I also charge them, once we have sent them the 3 letters, we have what's called a tacit agreement in place then. Yeah. Because they've not answered what we've asked of them, they basically agree to our terms, and this is part of our terms.
So this is, what, 3 letters in, are you saying?
After the 3rd letter, you have a tacit agreement, unless, of course, they supply you with what we ask for, and, of course, they don't.
And this is, nobody's ever got this stuff out of the banks?
Never, never, okay. No one ever.
Okay.
I also charge them £100 at that point for any letter they send me from then on.
Right.
It's clearly stated there will be a charge of £100 if you want to contact me.
Yeah.
And I also add that if they fail to make that payment of £100, that fee will rise to £1,000.
Okay.
So I've not had a payment of £100 yet, so each time it goes to £1,000 for them just contacting me. And the whole point is they make up these charges on nothing.
Right.
So I'm just doing exactly the same back to them.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is my time's more valuable than theirs, so I charge more.
Right.
The first time I ever used it, I sent an invoice to a debt collector for £7,000.
Okay.
He replied back the very next day stating he wasn't going to pay that and he was going to continue to chase me.
Right.
On that invoice, I had my trademark copyright information.
Mm-hmm.
So in reply to his letter, I sent another invoice back, but this time it used my name twice.
Right.
So it was for 2,009,000 and X amount of pounds.
Very nice. You could afford one of the Arsenal back four now, couldn't you? Really?
They never contacted me again.
Yeah.
At 7,000, they thought we can afford to take this to court, and if we lose, it's 7,000. But when it was 2 million plus, they certainly thought twice about taking it any further.
So literally, invoicing, billing them was enough to scare them.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is quite incredible.
Well, if you think about it, if they're looking to get chasing me for £5,000, then if they lose and they have to pay me £7,000, that's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lose and have to pay me 2,009,000 plus, that is a rather big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than take the chance, they go, whoa, let's just push that away, get rid of it.
So does anyone ever get paid? Has anyone ever got the money out of the debt collectors for this?
We are looking at methods of doing this.
Right.
And I do believe this is why they're getting so panicky at the moment, because we are getting closer to actually getting some money out of them. As of yet, no, but it's not about the money. It's about, we asked you, can you prove we owe this? If you can't, leave me alone. That's all we say.
It's the absolute principle, isn't it? That's what we're talking about here. Well, we'll have some more of your questions from the text with a bit of luck. Just a reminder of that number again. It's 86686 on your mobile phone. Text the word EDGE at the beginning. That's EDGE, E-D-G-E, then followed by your message. That's standard network charges apply. Make sure you get EDGE at the front or you might get some very bizarre responses. So that's just a little bit of a warning. But we'll be back with the team from Get Out of Debt Free, Jon Whitterick and Ceylon, after this break. Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm Alex G and I'm here with the team from Get Out of Debt Free. That's Jon Whitterick and Ceylon. Straight over to our TJ Glenda, who's got a few of your texts that have come through.
We've got a good text here from Pete from Derby. He's asking Edge, I've just paid off my mortgage, but they won't give me the original mortgage contract back. Can I sue them for the value of it?
Okay. Do you want to take that one, gentlemen?
Yes, sure. The reason they won't give you the contract back is while we ask for a contract in the letters to the debt collector, we ask for a contract. And it should be obvious that to anyone that if it was nothing dodgy, the banks would issue a contract.
Right.
However, they don't, because if they issue the contract, they've actually got to tell you where the money comes from. The fact that your signature on that document creates the money.
Right.
What happens is they use an agreement because there's no binding to it. They haven't got to tell you. They haven't got to be honest with you. When you go and you fill out an agreement, say for £10,000, and then you sign that agreement, well, if you look in the Bills of Exchange Act, 1888, you will find that it states that when you do that, you actually change that agreement into a promissory note. It's actually worth £10,000.
Right.
All the bank does is monetarise it. Now, they then allegedly lend you that £10,000 that you created when you signed that agreement. They lend it to you, and then they want you to pay it back plus interest.
Right.
So we'll say, for instance, that £10,000 you lend, and then you pay it back plus interest. Well, they've actually made £25,000 because they can still sell the agreement, and often do. And this, coming back to the text, this is what's probably happened here. They've kept it for a while, and then they've probably sold it on for the full amount that it was originally mortgaged for. They've been paid for it. They haven't got it anymore.
Goodness me. Need to point out to people, a reminder on the text is 86686, and you must put the word EDGE first, because if you don't put EDGE first, it goes into this immortal black hole and will never be seen of again. So we'll take a few more texts again now. Glenda, what have we got?
We've got a couple of short ones here. Simon in Notts, I've got £5,000 on my credit card. Do I have to pay it by law?
Okay.
And does the Consumer Credit Act does the Consumer Credit Card Act, excuse me, it's just jumping around here.
So we've got the Consumer Credit Act.
Yeah, sorry, I've just lost the actual...
Okay, well, should we cover the £5,000 on your credit card? What can you do about that?
Yeah, well, I think the question was, is it legal? And there again, we get back to this thing between legal and lawful.
Right.
And it ties in actually with the other text about the Consumer Credit Act, because the Consumer Credit Act is another statute law. And as I say, a statute law is a legislative rule of society given the force of law by those who consent. If you no consent, no law. And and this is now they still might, you know, there's a chance they could take you to court, but certainly with the strategies that we're using on the website, this isn't happening so much.
So how do you tell the difference between the Bills of Exchange Act on one hand and then the Consumer Credit Act?
The Bills of Exchange Act is a statute as well, because anything with the word act means it's a statute.
Okay.
But that applies to fictitious entities. It applies to persons in the legal sense of it.
Right.
Or it applies to straw men. It's all the same thing. It's the token. It's like, think of it like the Monopoly token.
Monopoly,
We're back to the little dog. We're back to the shoe or the battleship. Racing car's my favourite. Now, now the trouble is, you see, so that it applies to your straw man, it applies to your person. But the great thing is, you see, because they are a fictitious entity themselves, they're not a living, breathing soul. They're a collection of people working as a fictitious entity, a company. Yeah. So the great thing is that they have to abide by the rope that they use to tie us up. They have to abide by their own laws. So the great thing is we sort of stand outside the system and say, no, sorry, we're not having that. But we say, hang on, you've got to, here, Bills of Exchange Act, 1882. Under this act, it means because the debt collector's already paid it off, then I don't owe you anything. So they have to actually, you know, it's their laws that they have to actually abide by.
So it's almost like you're using their stick to beat them with.
Most definitely, most definitely. It's great fun as well.
Now, I know what a lot of people viewing it are going to say is, now, hold on a minute, surely this is your duty as a customer of a bank or financial institution to actually settle your debts, because if you don't, then it's going to fall on somebody else, and that's not fair.
And I've had the same question, slightly different way. They say, well, look, you've spent the money, so shouldn't you pay it back? So, you know, don't you feel guilty? You know, you've had £10,000 on your credit card, and I'm not suggesting people go out using credit cards and actually get loads of debt and then use because what you're doing then, you're acting like the bankers. What we're saying is we're acting lawfully, but if you're in a situation, and you will get into debt, because if you look at the moment, companies get into debt, people get into debt, and countries get into debt because the system is designed that way. There is no real money. There's no gold backing it anymore. So what I would say to anyone that says, look, you've spent the money, why aren't you paying it back? Well, what I'd say to you, Alex, is if I actually got on my little Epson printer and actually printed out £10,000 in notes, and they were good enough for you to actually pass off at your local pub and supermarket, you spent all the money, and the last note, you realise, hang on, it's fake. It's totally fake. Would you pay me back if you knew that it was forged money? Now, okay, the Bank of England, or you know, actually says right, or this is it, and we're behind it. But the whole thing is, you could realise that the Bank of England is just another company. It's not part of the government. It's actually just another company, and they've decided they have the authority to print money. Well, you know. And
there was fuss when suddenly the Bank of England starts dictating what the interest rates is. This was a certain revolutionary thing. Yeah. But this is literally putting the fox in charge of a hen house then.
Most definitely, most definitely. And don't think there's any difference between the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England and the Central European Bank. All the central banks, the same people are all behind it.
So what you're saying is they're all private.
Yes.
So they're all answerable to shareholders.
Yes,
and
we don't know who those shareholders are necessarily, but we know that they are private companies.
In a second. This is something just popped into my mind I was researching recently. During the rebels' revolt in Libya in March, they actually took 2 days off to set up a central bank.
Did they?
Yes.
Goodness me.
Now, Libya already has its own bank, run by the Libyans.
Yeah.
They print their own money. So the IMF has got no control over them. And that's one of the reasons this Libya is really all going on about.
And if you look at the countries which are all sort of, you know, that America wants, or France and England want to go to war with, they're all countries that aren't under the IMF.
The International Monetary Fund.
International Monetary Fund, yeah.
So famous for their latest intervention in Ireland.
Well, that's correct, yes, yeah. So, yeah, they're crooks. They are crooks, in my opinion.
Right, well, we've managed to decipher a few more of your texts, so what I'm going to do is pass over again to Glenda. What we got?
Yeah, sorry about that glitch there. The question about the Consumer Credit Act, it was, does the Consumer Credit Act at 1974 conflict with the Bills of Exchange Act?
Right. So is there a conflict?
Thanks. I don't honestly, I don't get too caught up in all the, you know, what we do. We go through the acts and we find out. I mean, that's something that if somebody, we could certainly put it on the forum and answer that one. Yeah. I don't get too bogged down in the law. What I say to people is that my sort of understanding of this is that of an educated 12-year-old. Right. I keep it really simple. But there are people who know, and I'm sure there are other channels on Sky where you've got a gentleman by the name of Max Kaiser.
Right.
Now he's
Russia
actually
Today, I think.
Yeah. Russia Today and Al Jazeera. Not that we're plugging your other channels, but
other news services are available. Yes.
They certainly are. However, you look at Max Kaiser. Now he's been an insider. He has set up stock markets, and his understanding goes way beyond mine and way beyond Ceylon's, I'm sure. However, what he's saying is that when he's talking about the central banks, he calls them financial terrorists. So you've got somebody with a huge amount of knowledge about the banking industry, who's been in the banking industry and got out, agreeing with somebody like myself who just ended up in debt and decided to find my way out. So we haven't got all the answers by any means, but what we have done is pulled the pieces together, and the fact that somebody like Max Kaiser agrees with us on the central banking and how fraudulent it is, I think, right, we can't be too much off the mark.
So in terms of your dealings with banks and other financial institutions, with writing them the letters, etc. What are some of the responses you've got? Are there some more funny ones than others, and are there some really bizarre
I mean,
ones?
I forgot to bring my letters. I've got a pile of letters about that thick now, from you know, because they just keep sending. Also, initially they didn't give up quite so quickly, because I just put up some very basic letters. And then when Ceylon got involved, that's when we started putting a lot more teeth into the letters. So we don't get quite so many letters, but I used to get a big pile. But of course, I never paid them a penny, because I understood that it was totally fraudulent. Yeah.
And Ceylon, you've got one of two binders here worth of information. So, I mean, what you're suggesting here is keep files of what you've actually sent.
Yeah, you need to be organised. Some people think that, you know, oh, well, I sent letter 1, did I send letter 2? Well, just have a look, you can see, you find it, it's there. We send them recorded delivery and staple them to the letters you've sent. Yeah. Check that they've been received, and well. And
you can go onto the Royal Mail website and get the actual signature these days, can't you, for recorded deliveries? Yeah, right.
Well, like I say, there's 2 folders. If I just briefly give you, because somebody mentioned about the bailiffs, well, debt collectors as well. When I was going through the process, I was dealing all the debt collector letters with these responses. Right. It got to the point where, and I'm sure this will happen to other people, where I got a letter from Cobalt Finance, basically saying, an agent's going to be calling on you on such and such a date. Call us immediately. Right. Now, normally I would have sent the letter, but I thought, well, actually, I know enough about this now. It should be an interesting conversation if it turns up.
Right, yeah.
So I totally ignored that letter. And about a week later, I get another letter from them stating that the date had been put back. Right. Because of technical issues. He will be calling on this date. It was about a week later. Call us immediately. Well, I totally ignored that one as well, and thought, I'll wait. I want to see this guy turn up. Third letter comes, right, it'll be cut, it's definitely coming this day. And that was the last letter I ever got off them. Nobody turned up. And the reason for that is the majority of debt collectors only have a licence to contact you by phone or mail.
Right.
Now, they'll put in the letters, an agent's going to be calling at your property, 9 out of 10 don't have the licence to do that, as that particular one proved, which I suspected, but I thought, you know, it should be interesting if anyone does turn up, but they didn't.
I'm conscious of the time, and I'm conscious that we've got quite a few responses, so if we swing over to our TJ Glenda again, if you want to give us a potpourri of what's there.
My PC starts playing up. There's been a lot of messages of encouragement and gratitude as well, guys. I just want to read out one. Edge, I'd like to thank Ceylon and Jon for their advice. I worked 60 hours a week to pay off my debts, and thanks to Ceylon and Jon, I now have time with my family. So that was very touching.
So there we go. For anybody who actually suspects this does not work, there's certainly one candidate for the plus side, as it were.
There was a message earlier on from a person called Kaza. Can we still get out of debt free if we have been paying a debt consolidation company?
Okay, debt consolidation. If you've actually agreed to pay £1 a week or something like that.
Yes.
So it works with that as well.
Yeah.
Right.
At the end of the day, all you're doing, even to the company, you're sending them off a letter saying, look, you know, I know I've been paying you £1 a week or whatever for so long, but information's come into my grasp that the debt might not actually be lawful. Can you please provide me with proof that it's lawful? And when they can't, stop paying them.
And the £1 a week, of course, is a bit of a trick which debt collectors use. And remembering that debt collectors buy the debt from the bank for merely pence in the pound. So if you've got a £1,000 debt, they might only pay a few hundred for it. And if they can't get the money back, you know, they can put it back in their pot and get some of the money back. But the thing is, one of the little tricks that they do, they say, OK, if you can't pay the whole lot, how much can you pay? And a lot of people say, well, I'll give you £1 a month. And I did. I did this one because I thought, well. And of course, it costs them probably £5 to actually, you know, get somebody to open the envelope and put it through. But the reason they're doing that is to try and contract with you, because up until that point, you have no contract. But as soon as you say, OK, I'll pay you £1 a week, they say, OK, we've got a contract. However, if anyone's done that, I would suggest you don't do it. But if you have done it, don't panic, because with the letters, we're still asking for things that he can't give us. So don't panic if you've already done that.
Now, quickly, I'm noticing time is absolutely racing away with this. There's a pile of things in front of here, Ceylon. Perhaps you could explain what these are and what you can do with these. Now, what are they, for a start off?
Parking tickets, basically.
That's a lot.
All parking tickets that I've got.
OK.
Most of them deliberately, but that's because I know that they're not lawful. And the simple reason that they're not lawful, originally, there's two ways to deal with them. One is refuse them for cause. What you have to understand with the parking ticket, that's an offer of a contract.
Right, OK, so we're back to the contractual basis.
Most people think it's not. They think it's a parking ticket and they happily pay it. It's an offer of a contract. And under contract law, you have 72 hours to refuse the contract. And what we do is we write it at a 45-degree angle, refuse for cause, without dishonour, and there's a few other things on there. It's all on the website in general topics, parking tickets.
And that's getoutofdebtfree.org. Yeah. Okay.
And then recently we discovered the Bills of Exchange Act, the Bill of Rights Act, 1688-89.
Right.
And that is still in force. In fact, they're on about actually changing it very soon to stop these celebrities doing these mega shut the silence the papers thing. And in that, it states, absolutely states, a fine or forfeiture before going to court is unlawful and void. That is a fine, and if it's not a fine, it's a forfeiture.
Right. So very quickly, about a minute and a half we've got, in terms of your opinion of the census, are we talking contract here again?
Absolutely.
So the census is the same thing?
Yes.
This is why they call it the occupier then, rather than address it to you?
Occupy is something a foreign army does to another country.
OK.
I haven't filled mine in. I sent them a conditional acceptance, which they ignored, so I'll be getting another visit from them. There is a visit on YouTube of the first guy that came quite recently.
Gotcha.
And of course, that information is going to, is it McDonnell Douglas? One of the biggest, one of the big arms manufacturers are collating the actual information in America.
That's nice. That's
wonderful.
Nice. So they're involved with it. Lovely. Lovely.
Lockheed Martin, I think it is.
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin,
yes, that's definitely the one. Well, apologies if we've not got to your text tonight. As I say, we've been absolutely flummoxed by them. Just to let you know that my clock has gone down, so I'm not too sure how near the end I am. But all I have to say is this is the first of 2 hours tonight. So Ian R. Crane is joining us after this break when we have a whole separate brand new programme where we'll be touching on some of the topics that happened in the last 7 days. And boy, are there a lot of them. So that just leaves me to say, under the radar, around the world, thanks very much to our guests at Get Out of Debt Free. You've been on the